Hello, good morning, everybody. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes, all good.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so much. So, good morning. My name is Krishnan, and I want to start with a story. Uh, about a year ago, in our internal Slack channel, I got pinged with an email ID of a candidate. So when developers come to Geek Trust, they register, right? So on a Slack channel, I got pinged with this email ID of a developer. So I go look at his first thing we do is we always look at what is their Geek Trust score, right? How good did they do? And his score was like fantastic. His score was almost close to, in today's terms, 100 out of 100. And then the person who pinged me the email ID told me, check out the guy's profile. And when I go read up his profile, his current job is as a coffee salesman. He's working at Kota's Coffee as a coffee salesman. He was just so interested in writing code and learning about code that he put in the effort himself. Nobody taught him. He put in the effort himself. He looked up online resources and he wrote really, really, really good code. Today, he's working at an AI startup that is valued at 100 crores. That, friends, is the power of code. And that is what Geektrust does. Geektrust helps developers find great opportunities based on the coding skill, not based on where you studied, not based on where you're working now, but just based on the power of, your ability to write good code. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. And we work with companies. We work with companies who believe that, whatever your background is, if you have got the ability and the passion to learn and write good code, they will hire you. So broadly, that's my story. This is the story of Geek Trust. This is a little bit of an outlier story, but it's a story about what we believe in. Geek Trust is a platform that helps developers, that has been helping developers for the last 7 years to find jobs based on the ability to write good code. So I've been in the tech space for about 17 years now. My name is Krishnan. I used to work at Thoughtworks for about 10 years, then started Geek Trust 7 years ago. When we started Geek Trust, not a lot of companies were willing to look at code as the way to identify good candidates. We were working with 5-10 startups maybe at that time. This is back in 2015. Over the years, we have had more acceptance. More and more companies have come forward saying, we believe in the Geek Trust way of looking at code to identify good talent. Today, we work with 100 plus companies from startups. A lot of startups still hire through us. We work with companies like Thoughtworks, Intuit, and I have Chethan from Siemens here. So a lot of really good companies who believe that, code is the way to find good talent. We had an event for Intuit last week. We work with startups like Scriptbox, Math Street Den. We used to work with Zomato, so on and so forth. So that's a quick overview about Geek Trust and what we do. I do want to call out something which is a little different from, which differentiates Geek Trust from the other sort of platforms out there. Having worked in tech for so long, when I started my career, this is back in 2003, when I started my career, I started out as a developer. So I still remember the first thing I did, like many of you probably did, was fix a bug. When you start out as writing code, you get somebody gives you a bug to fix and says, oh, you go fix it. And I fixed the bug and I was very proud of it. It was fairly complex. I even remember what it is. It was fairly complex. I fixed the bug and I pushed it. And my tech lead who was reviewing the code, he called me over. Okay. And I thought, I did a good job. I was very happy. And he says, what is this? I said, I fixed the bug. It works. I checked it. I tested it out. But he says, you know what he said? He says, I can't understand what you did. And that at that point is when I realized that it's just not about fixing the bug, but it's about what code you wrote. In 4 years of college, in my entire training at that company, nobody told me that how I write my code is important. that my code should be readable to understand and to others was important. I fixed bugs. I fixed that bug. But at that point was an aha moment for me, saying that the code that you write, it is important that others should be able to read and understand it. And that is the concept of how Geek Trust evaluates code. We look for your ability to write what we call clean code. Clean code, very simply put, is code that others can read and understand and can build on top of. For 99% of us, when we go start working as a developer somewhere, we are not going to write the product from scratch, right? Most likely we'll have a code base that others have built, done something, and what we can do from our end is add features on top of it and hopefully leave it in a better place than we found it. I think most of you will agree that this is what happens in the real world. And what Geek Trust does is we check for that skill. What we are asking you to do is not to just complete one coding round, one coding challenge. It's about showcasing your skill. Think about Geek Trust as a place where you can showcase your skill, what we say, build a code portfolio. Luckily for us, developers are a tribe where some of our skills can be relatively objectively measured, right? Like I tell my friends in sales and marketing, right? I don't know how to assess in interviews for sales and marketing folks, but at least developers, I can look at something and say, hey, this code looks fairly decent. I'd like to talk to the lady or the guy who wrote this. So this is what Geek Trust does. We have more than 3 million lines of code have been written and uploaded on Geek Trust over the last 7 years. This year, I think we have crossed 550 developers that have gotten offers on Geek Trust. Pretty much every day, about 3 developers get offers via Geek Trust. We work with 100 plus companies, and that is growing rapidly. I will not take too much time. I just wanted to give you an overview of what Geek Trust is and what we do. Let me now just tell you about the plan for today. So we'll first have Nandagopal, who's here, talk to us about how he used clean code in his job search. Nandagopal is currently with Thoughtworks. He used to work with Geek Trust via Thoughtworks earlier, and now he's converted full-time to a Thoughtworks employee. Post which we'll have Chethan from Siemens, who heads digital and technology solutions, give an overview about Siemens. Siemens is actively hiring, and we'd love for a bunch of you folks to interview with Siemens too. Then we will hand it over to Dibin, who will talk about his experience of writing code from a fresher's perspective, and he's working at a top-notch agri-tech startup called Jiva now. And finally, for those who are interested and want to stay over, Aneesh from Geek Trust will tell you about how to go about solving a Geek Trust coding challenge. We'll do a quick session on what we look for, what is clean code, and so on. So that's the agenda for the day. We should hopefully wrap up in an hour. Shouldn't take too much time. Okay, and so that you guys and girls can get back to writing code and solving the challenge. So all the best. I will hand it over now to Nandagopal to talk about his experience and let us know how his experience was. Hey, Nandagopal, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Krishnan. So that was a pretty good intro. I guess you covered what Geek Trust is about overall and what attracts us to Geek Trust, right? So, hey, everyone, good morning. So I'm Nanda Gopal. So like Krishnan mentioned, I was working with Thoughtworks for the past 8 months, first via Geek Trust, and now I'm converted to a FT, full-time employee, right? And as far as my story goes, how did I get to Geek Trust, right? It was totally not planned. I had a friend ping me during those job search crazy times, right? Where, hey, guess what? I found this site where it's not just a typical hiring site. It's a little different. You should check it out. They have some pretty interesting problems to solve, and it's totally based on what you solve that you get into a company. So that's the only thing I heard. So I thought, yeah, okay, let's see what the site is about. So I got onto the Geektrust site, and they actually had pretty interesting problem. It's not just the typical binary tree traversal and all those things. they had actual problems where the problem statement was relatable and there's a story behind it, right? And that was interesting. So I started off, I was pretty confident that I'll solve it, and did my first submission of whatever solution that I had, was pretty confident. And later on, maybe a few days later, I got a feedback with a score that was totally embarrassing, to be frank. And that's when the feedback that I got, that's what opened my eye, I would say, to clean coding and what clean coding is about. And the facts, or the feedback that I got, was totally direct, and it had a reason behind it. That's when I would say I started looking into clean code. Why should we write clean code? What does it matter? It's I'm getting the output. That's not enough. So that's where, like Krishnan mentioned, things come in where on how you write code matters, right? And it was pretty interesting. So the Geektrust site itself had a lot of tips on how you can write clean code, why it's important, and all those things. With subsequent submissions and entries, I was able to uh, what do you say, improve my code, improve my score. And to be frank, I was not expecting it. I actually got a hit on my profile from the Thoughtworks profile, right? I was like, okay, I did not expect that because Thoughtworks was one of the companies I thought I'll never crack, and Thoughtworks is showing interest in my profile. I was like, okay, I'll give it a go, and that was the start of it, and here I am. So the process itself, I would say, was pretty seamless. I mean, there was no confusions, or right after my code got accepted by Thoughtworks, there were a couple of rounds of interviews from Geektrust, as well as a extra round from Thoughtworks, and that was it. So, and I would say, as a employee who got in via Geektrust, they do realize, or they do uh, have some expectations that, hey, you've gotten through Geek Trust, you already have an idea of what clean code is. You know what is testable code. You know what is modularization, or whatever those best practices are. So it was a pretty interesting experience for me, and I never thought I would get that from any other hiring site. So I'm pretty thankful for that. And even after I got into ThoughtWorks, I felt this is not all gone waste, because I got into a culture where they respect this. This is what they look for, and Geektrust is able to provide candidates who are also looking for this, or who are also concerned, or know the importance of clean coding and the best practices. So yeah, I'm actually happy that I got to work with folks from Geektrust, as well as right now I'm with ThoughtWorks. So that's my story. And yeah, right now I'm getting to see clean code on a daily basis. I know what clean coding is about. I know why it is important in the industry itself, and why the upcoming candidates should also be aware of it, because most of the times we don't get to hear about this in our college life, or let's say even afterwards, competitive programming. You'll hear about complexities, time, space, all those things, but not clean code, not very often. So yeah, so that's my story. I mean, I'd be happy to answer any questions on around these lines, or about ThoughtWorks, or anything that the folks here have today for me. But that's my story.
Hey,
It's nice to meet you.
thanks a lot, Nanda Gopal. I do have a question for you,
Yep.
which I'm guessing many folks may have. Do you have any tips on how to go about? How did you start solving the coding challenge? Like lots of people today will take it up. So, what tips do you have for them?
The first step is, don't do what I did, not just download the problem and start off. So, to be frank, right, I believe the Geek Trust site itself has a lot of tips on what they look for in a code. So, that is something that first and foremost you want to go through, so that you'll actually get an idea on what clean coding is. What are the factors, or what are the elements that make your code clean? How do you make it readable? How do you make it scalable? All those things. How do you make it testable? So it's very important that you first understand these concepts, and then go on analyzing that problem with this in mind. So I would suggest, it's always a good idea on to know what level of code, or what Geektrust is expecting from your code. It's always a good thing, and they have a really good documentation of it, which I guess the new and revamped site is having much more additions to it. So yeah, please do check that out first, and then yeah, take your time. I would say solve the problem as if you're solving a story, and just implement it in your code. That's it.
Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Nanda Gopal. I hope you'll be around if people ask questions on chat.
Yeah,
I hope you'll be around to answer that. And
sure.
to Nanda Gopal's point, towards the end of this talk, Aneesh will walk you through what we expect, so that is also clear. I don't think Nanda Gopal had that opportunity earlier,
No,
so
no.
you folks are getting that opportunity now. We will tell
Correct.
you very clearly what we expect from the code. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nanda Gopal, for coming today morning and speaking to us.
Thanks a lot.
Folks, so that was Nandagopal. I've also pinged the link to the application that Nandagopal had given in the chat that he had applied and so on. So that is also available. For our next speaker, we have Chethan. Chethan is a technologist. He's an expert in Agile, SDLC, and he leads digital transformation at Siemens, consulting, prototyping, solution building, all of that he's involved in. Great person for you all to ask questions if you have. Siemens has a bunch of positions that opened on Geek Trust and is actively looking to hire. So any questions you have around Siemens, around what sort of opportunities, the process, etc., do feel free to ask in the chat, and I'll make sure it gets answered. Chethan, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Krishnan. Thanks for that quick introduction. And to begin with, like I was deep inside hoping that none of you will pull out a PowerPoint, because then it would be some sort of performance pressure. I would have to pull out a PowerPoint. Thanks for that, both of you. And welcome, everyone. I see maybe 100+ people who have joined this conversation. That's really heartening to see. I will probably spend a couple of minutes on our expectations and also who we are, what we do, and so on and so forth, probably in the other order. Okay, so Siemens is almost a 170+ years organization. We take a lot of pride in this longevity of the company. Rarely do companies survive this long. Forget companies, even countries do not survive this long. Hopefully they will in the future, but so far 170 years, amazing history. But what is more interesting is that we do not just take pride in surviving for 170 years, but we also take immense pride in how we have been constantly rediscovering ourselves, playing by the present day rules, and thriving. Imagine 1800s and 2020. We are as relevant as we were. And it is also an amazing tidbit about Siemens is a lot of our revenue, maybe 50% plus of our revenue, comes from what we have built, invented in the last 5 years or so. Okay, so that's about the longevity, sustainability of the company. Okay, and also read it the fact that an average company on NASDAQ survives for roughly around 30 years, and that I think is coming down. So companies hit their peak and then they go down, most of them. Meaning, when I say average, I'm sure you understood. But here we are probably beating the average by 5-6 times, okay, and going strong. That's one part. The second part is the diversity that the company brings in. When I say diversity, I'm not just talking about gender diversity. Of course, that is an important part, but in terms of geographical diversity. So we are present in almost all the countries, barring a few where we are not allowed to do business, but probably 190 countries, right? I think we are like Coca-Cola, right? I think they are available in all countries. We probably, because of the business that we are in, some of the embargoed and sanctioned countries, we are not allowed to work, but otherwise we are present in all the countries. Our revenue comes from all these regions and is pretty much equally distributed. When I say equally distributed, Europe brings in certain chunk, US brings in certain chunk, Asia brings EMEA, okay, brings in certain chunk. So all of this are pretty much equally distributed. So we are not like US centric, Europe centric. No, we are spread all across. This is about the company, the diversity, history, and so on and so forth. But what do we do? What do we exactly do? So we are into a bunch of things. First one is what we call DI, digital industries, which covers everything that is manufactured, which basically means everything, right? Because everything needs to be manufactured, both discrete as well as process. When I say discrete, it could be your computers, cars, mixers, things like that. Process industry is toothpaste, cement, pharma, all of it. Now, do we make it? No, we don't make it. So we don't make these things. We help the customers build the factories, which they will then use to make these goods, right? So for example, top 30 automotive companies in the world are, they run on factories built by Siemens, okay? So where Lamborghini, Maserati, Audi, BMW, all of these, okay? Including Tata, Ford, everything is built on factories made by us or using our technology. Similarly, process industry, right? Toothpaste, cement, anything, pharma. In fact, the COVID vaccines that were manufactured were all built in the factories that use our technology, right? So that's one part. Then the second part is what we call smart infrastructure, SI, DI, SI. SI is smart infrastructure, which includes everything from smart buildings, which includes like HVAC, sensors, fire detection, alarm systems. And I'm talking about large buildings, you know, like it's not like residential complexes. It's huge buildings, which include factories and stuff like that. Stadiums, airports, right? All of these. And then also the power distribution, anything that is related to power. So all of that comes into smart infrastructure, including charging infrastructure for electric automotives and so on and so forth. So that is DI, SI. And then the third piece is what we call mobility. Mobility is primarily dealing with trains, okay? Both rolling stock as well as intelligent traffic management. Now, that's the width. And of course, we have healthcare. So Siemens Healthineers, where we do a lot of modalities, starting from CTs, MRIs, ultrasound, and all the technology that goes behind it. So now you see the physical world, right? So starting from DI to SI, mobility, and healthcare. So this is physical world. So these are devices that you can put your hands on, you can feel. These are touching you every day, okay? Now, what we do within Siemens technology is, now all of these devices have a digital life. So we bring that digital life to existence. So all of these are highly complicated, complex, fairly smart devices. Now, what we do is we put the digital brain in them and make them really, really smart. Okay, I can give examples, but that would not be required in this in this gathering. But surely, if some of you are interested, and I hope many of you will be interested in joining us, then surely we can sit down, have a detailed conversation on how we make these devices smart, and what do we do to do this? So it's all digital. Now the question is, why do you want to make these devices smart? They are cool, they are good, they are doing their job. Why do you want to meddle with them? Because there is a lot of scope to improve things. Okay, when I say improve things, I'll give you one or two examples, and then maybe we can move forward. So one example is these rotary devices. When I say rotary devices, anything that rotates, right? It could be a pump, it could be a compressor, it could be a spindle in a robotic arm, anything that rotates, which covers a lot of things. In fact, rotary components take 80% of the power that is generated. Okay, they are ubiquitous. They are present all in all places. And these rotary devices fail. And why do they fail? For various reasons. Could be the speed at which it is rotating, could be the load, could be the alignment, the quality of power, a bunch of things, right? Now, what we do is we put this digital brain onto that device, and then we start acquiring data. So this data is acquired, and I'm talking about terabytes of data, right? This data is acquired, and based on all the advanced algorithms that we build, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning components that go into it, we are able to predict the failure of a component before it happens. Now, just imagine what kind of impact it can have on the entire supply chain. So you know what component will break with a fair amount of accuracy, right? So maybe it will break in the next 48 hours. So now you can first optimize the entire supply chain, because you know next 3 months you will need 10,000 spindles in the EMEA region. You need 5,000 spindles going to China, and so on and so forth. So that's one part, right? The supply chain. And then go back, and then you know how to procure, what raw material should you procure, and so on and so forth. Now, what is also good is, because we are constantly collecting data and analyzing, I can feed that data back to the R&D and then tell them, you know, like before this spindle breaks, the bearing temperature hits 70 degrees centigrade. Now just check, there could be something that you might be able to do, right? This is one example. Now, the other example could be in healthcare. So where you might be able to predict with a fair amount of accuracy what is the possibility of somebody getting readmitted after getting treated, right? So somebody underwent a bypass surgery. What is the probability that the person might get readmitted in 90 days, right? So that's the magic of data. So what we do is do a bunch of analytics on all of the data that comes in from the physical world and create that digital existence for these components, and overall make it better, much, much better. Okay, and this we do in all the industries that we play in. Over in Bangalore, we have, so we are present in 5 locations in India. In Bangalore, we have the largest, around 3,000 people. We are in Pune, we are in Chennai, we are in Gurgaon and Noida. So in all these places, we are actively recruiting. So if you feel, you know, like, and you know, like, obviously I take pride in my business and how we touch lives. You know, like, it's not about posting a status. It's not about liking somebody's comments. It is impacting real life. So if you mess up, you probably bring a grid down. If you mess up, you probably stop a factory floor, right? So we take a lot of pride. In fact, some people even call that ghamand, rightfully so. We take that because ours is mission critical. So we run everything from factories to grids that supply power to major buildings, all of it. Critical infrastructure. So if you want to see how your work can have a real life impact, okay, not likes and comments and posts and stuff, not demeaning them, they are cool, I do that. But if you really want to make a difference to the world, meaning give us a try, I'm sure you will not regret. It is, of course, demanding job. You know, like, there is a lot of domain and there is technology, right? What like Krishnan was saying, clean code, yeah, we do value immensely. In fact, more than anybody else, because some of our code goes into the machine, right? So I need to really keep it clean. Okay. And many of us do edge computing. So I'm sure none of you are old enough to understand computers came with a restriction of memory, including you, Nanda Gopal. So there was an era. Okay, Krishnan says he knows. There was an era where like writing code used to be like a video game, right? So as you keep going up, the level gets more and more difficult. You would have limited amount of memory, limited amount of channels, how you communicate. So we are in that kind of business, right? Microseconds, nanoseconds kind of response rate. This is serious stuff. And I'm sure the hardcore techie in you will really thank you if you were to take up on this offer. So that's on the coding side. Now, we also need domain, and I'll end with this statement. We also need domain, which is equally important, right? Every company, like when you start writing code, it's not so abstract, right? Either you work for a banking kind of software, you work for FMCG, you work for oil and gas. So there is a domain. In certain cases, it takes a lot of importance. In our case, it does. So you need to really know what you are doing. So it will be cool. So yeah, that's at a very high level. If there are questions, I'd be willing to answer. Of course, like I can keep going unless I eat into others' time. So being mindful of others' time, I'll take a pause.
Chethan, I think that is one of the most interesting talks that I've heard in a while. Now I am excited about Siemens. Superb, very, very interesting stuff. So one question I think, for a lot of folks here will be, and somebody's already asked, is this: what is the general interview process at Siemens? In the interview process, how much would it be about tech? How much is aptitude? How much is attitude? What is the general? How do we get into Siemens?
Yeah, I hope my HR colleague Harini is here. If she wants to take it up, she can. Else, I will talk. Harini, if you are around and if you want to take it up, if not, I will do it. Okay, looks like she's not there. Krishnan, we do different types of hiring, right? So obviously from very junior
Sorry,
level.
Chethan, I could not unmute. Maybe I can still add value. I mean, maybe if you've started, you can. I can certainly add wherever you think I can.
Sure, Harini. So we do hire at various levels, right? So we hire college grads, which typically is our campus program. We also hire people with 0 to 2, 3 years of experience who have some sort of exposure to coding and are kind of, they want to do something more interesting. And then, of course, we hire seniors in architect role and beyond that, where we also need a little bit of domain. So typical interview process would be, of course, after shortlisting and all that, there should be a coding challenge. And Harini, stop me, okay? Because we don't want to, meaning I don't want to mislead 100+ people about information that I'm not updated with. But we will have some sort of coding challenge. The objective is to make sure that, see, Krishnan, as you were saying, right? So if I'm a salesperson, I will have to weave story after story. I will have to tell you I cracked a $3 million deal last month, and you will have to trust me. But when you are a geek, you don't have to do that, right? So neither do you have to do that, neither do I have to listen to stories. Like as they say, the proof of the pudding is in eating, right? So you write code, I see code, I realize the quality, what is expected, what is available. Of course, there will be gaps and so on and so forth. So we make a selection there. So that is a tech select, right? After tech selection, we will have a round with the manager and HR. So the manager certainly would have conversations such as, what are you looking for in this job, and so on and so forth. The generic questions, right? the HR, of course, about location, compensation, career, and so on and so forth. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, Chethan, I also wanted to ask one question around, I think the work that you spoke about sounded really, really interesting. But being in tech for the last many years, one of the things I've realized is many of the companies which set up shop in India don't really do cutting edge work here. But I think Siemens does. So could you just speak to that?
Yeah, we will. I will. So, and again, you're right, Krishnan. It has been a combination of legacy and new age. At about, say, 2015-16, Siemens realized that digitalization will be the future. Okay, this is an industry that is very slow to change. Okay, and you should understand our software sits in power plants, right? So something that supplies power to a large city, country, power generation, stuff like that. And these are not people who will say, I will give you a cool UI, let's change it to the next version. No, it runs for 30, 40 years. So there is certainly so much of legacy. But then in 2016, we realized that we have to digitalize. The devices are there. Let's make them smart, and we can harness much more than what we are doing today. It opened a new world of opportunities across, and we started moving into things like microservices architecture, cloud native. So we started probably like in 2016. Apart from GE, they tried not so successfully with their platform in 2015, but in 2016 we were, I think, probably the first ones to put industrial data on AWS, right? So we do that. And then from there on, in the last 5-6 years, there's no looking back. Our digital journey has been amazing. A lot of products are conceptualized, and we play a role right from the beginning. Of course, it's a software company, so we do not have people who can go have domain conversation with customers like power plants or factory floor managers and so on and so forth. But thereafter, anything technology, we have a role to play, starting from understanding the requirements. So we do have product owner roles, a bunch of them. I think we have probably for 5,000 plus people, we have close to 200 product owners. That speaks volumes about the kind of work that we do. From product owners to architects to UX specialists, data engineers, data scientists, backend, full stack developers, all sorts of things. So yeah, that the technology and also the roles that we play.
Great. Chethan, was great having you here. I really, really enjoyed your talk about Siemens. Super passionate to hear. Very privileged to hear you speak. Harini, do you want to add something?
No, of course, I think Chethan did a wonderful job in what we are in really, and I'm proud, of course, we are proud to be part of such an organization. It is not only because of the legacy that we bring in, which is 170 years. Apart from this, what we really do today, which is, as Chethan mentioned, touching everybody's life and what we really do in every day. And hence, we'll be glad to have a super minds and smart people who really passionate about, what we really do. I think then here is a place for them to really try hard and see what better that they can learn from us. So nothing else in specific. And thank you so much for giving this opportunity for us. And anyone has any questions, of course, you can route it to me or Chethan after this discussion. We'll be glad to address them accordingly.
Yeah, just one last point I wanted to add, Krishnan, and everybody else, is, we are a company, of course, it's a for-profit stock exchange listed company, but very, very passionate about making a difference to the environment. We ourselves will go carbon neutral in 2030. So we are marching ahead. of our schedule. So we probably will hit the goal before that. Not only that, but we also make a huge impact in all the areas that we touch, the customers that we touch, right? Whether it is factories, power plants, buildings, anything that we do, we are very conscious of the carbon footprint, the environmental impact. And luckily or fortunately for us, we are in an area where we can help our customers make the world a better place. So all you youngsters there, of course, the quality of work is important, the impact that you make is important, compensation is important, career is important. But what is also important is that we are conscious, about the environment, what we do, and how we do our business. So I would request you to go to Siemens.com, look at what we do. And as Harini and Krishnan mentioned, we will be able to answer your questions over here or later. But looking forward to many of you taking this challenge and many of you joining us. Not only that, also spread the word, like your friends, people who you might know. This is an opportunity to make a difference. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Chethan. Thank you very much, Chethan and Harini, for coming and speaking here.
Yeah.
Sure, Krishnan. Thank you so much for this forum.
Yeah,
cool.
Bye.
Folks, if you have any questions, do put it in the chat, and we will nudge Chethan and Harini to answer them as we see the questions relevant for them. So to moving on to the next portion of our talk, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Neelu. Neelu heads the fresher hiring vertical at Geek Trust. I see a lot of questions from freshers as well, so she heads this particular vertical. Neelu is going to introduce one of the candidates we have placed recently. So Neelu, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Krishnan, and thank you, Chethan and Harini. It was amazing to hear you guys speak. So I take this opportunity to introduce one of the inspiring freshers that I have been in association with. To take this forward, earlier in the conversation, Krishnan had mentioned about power of code and the ability to write code. So Dibin Nadar is one such candidate who used his ability to write the code and the power of code from Geek Trust, we being the catalyst. Dibin has been an inspiring candidate for me. He had so much of ability and faith in his code, and we recognize that. And the first opportunity which came his way was within a week of him writing the code and clearing. And he was very confident that, hey, you know what, this opportunity, I'm going to let it pass because I have something better in my way. And bang on, within a week, he landed a job with Jiva. And here we have Dibin Nadar sharing his experience with us. Thank you and a very warm welcome to you, Dibin. Over to you.
Thank you, Neelu. You are very kind as always. So yeah, my name is Dibin Nadar, and I'm basically a civil engineer, and I passed out in the year 2020. So after that, it was the era of the pandemic. So finding placements was difficult. At that point, and then I started learning coding by myself using online resources, like a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of Udemy courses, and so on and so forth. And then after 8 months, I felt like I was finally ready to start applying jobs. And then I sent out my resume to a lot of places, and I did not get callbacks from any because my resume had fresher, self-taught developer, and civil engineer. Apparently not very hot in the market. Any which ways. So after that, I fortunately came across Geek Trust, where I saw that they had this tagline that your code is your resume. And I was like really interested by that because up till this point, I never got the opportunity to actually showcase my skills to the company. They just saw the resume and they're like, probably not worth it. So then I went into Geek Trust coding challenges, looked at it, and they introduced me to unit testing, readability, and clean code, concepts I had never heard. So yeah, I spent another few weeks trying to learn what those concepts are. And that was a very good eye-opener because up till that point, I thought coding was about writing the most efficient code with like the minimal lines, like making it extremely efficient. But then you realize coding is not actually an individual sport, but it's like a team sport. Like you actually, like you're working with other people. And that realization, when it hit me, it just changed the way I wrote code. I no longer wanted to be extremely efficient. I wanted to make sure anybody who's reading my code could like understand it. And that was like a changer for me. And so the Geek Trust have the concept of batches, which is like very intimidating. Like you go there, like readability badge, this badge, that badge, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? But then eventually I started writing code and made my first submission. Like Nanda Gopal, the score was not very encouraging. And at this point, Geek Trust steps in. They help you. They like, tell you ways you can improve your code and like where you could like, work on it and like you can make resubmissions and all those. So that helps you like become better over time. And a few submissions later, your score keeps on increasing. And during that time, Geek Trust had this freshers drive. And suddenly, like, I started getting calls from companies and like there's 2 3 companies at the time. And it was very weird for me coming from what you say. Not getting any callbacks to companies approaching me in the first go. So that was like really great. And yes, so yeah, like Neelu said, there were a few opportunities that I let go, and then I came across Jiva. So Jiva was also like, what Jiva does as a company really resonated with me. And then the interview process also was not traditional. Like they were like, it is what you would expect from a company coming through Geek Trust, basically. Like they did not care if you can answer theoretical questions. They did not ask you theoretical questions for theoretical answers. They really wanted to know if you understood what you wrote and why you wrote it, like that reasoning. And yeah, so as a fresher, getting an opportunity to work up in a startup where they really value clean code was like really unheard of for me, and it was really amazing. And I am really grateful for Geek Trust for giving me that opportunity. And that is it from me.
Hey, Dibin, thank you so much. I mean, I can't tell you how good it feels to me that somebody benefited from what we built. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think a lot of questions here, Dibin, and I think everybody's question is the same. I think Nandagopal also covered this to some extent, but I think a lot of freshers relate to you. They ask, how do we get started?
You just start writing. Like, I actually learned coding by myself from like, so yeah, once you know how to write code, it's no longer about like writing code. It's like solving the problem. So you go at the problem statement and you see what you want to solve. And then you see what Geek Trust expects of you. So right off the bat, you're not going to write extremely clean code. It's impossible. Nobody expects that from you. What they expect you is to like do your best, which is good enough, and then you improve upon it. And what really helped me with Geek Trust was before you make the submission, you can actually upload the code, and they have this automated system which will test and tell you which all badges you're already eligible for. Like if you have enough unit test coverage, or if you have like your readability is high, or if it's modular and all that, it helps. So before you actually make the submission, you can see where all you're lacking and you can improve upon it and then make the first submission. But then, yeah, like make the first submission and then it just gets easier. It's just that initial hurdle. You make the first submission, Geek Trust then just handholds you a lot. You just need to like put in consistent efforts. Yeah, Geek Trust makes it very easy actually.
Thanks, Dibin, for that. Also, I wanted to understand, I think many people here have been me saying I'm from a BSc background. I've done, somebody else said math, and you coming from civil into, coding, how hard was that? I know, Geek Trust doesn't help you learn how to write code from the basics. So how did you go about doing that part?
So that part is tricky. It's not easy to do. So I was actually working at Cognizant as a support employee for like 4 months, but it did not resonate with me. So I actually resigned and I was like unemployed for 8 months. It was during the pandemic, so it was a little easier, but then yeah, it was like, it takes efforts. It's like, it takes time. So you can't expect it to happen like overnight. You need to like work for like different people, different skills. But I think like 6 months of work on an average should like be enough. And then like another thing that I would recommend is instead of like solving extremely like intense codes, like if you just want to start off as a developer, you should like try to make projects, like tiny, simple to do projects. There are like many tutorials on YouTube. So like, yeah, like remember, you're not trying to like apply for a company where you're like gonna act like a machine and be extremely efficient. You're like gonna talk to people and your code needs to communicate. It's just, yeah, like that was enough for me, I think.
Great. Thanks for that, Dibin. I won't keep you anymore. I hope you're having a
Thanks,
good time
Krishnan.
at Jiva, and say hi to Tejas for me.
I will.
Okay, so Harini, Chethan, Dibin, and Nandagopal, thank you so much for coming over today and spending time with us. The rest of the session will most be about how to write clean code. So I don't think you folks need to be around for that. You're welcome to stay on, but you're also welcome to drop off if you'd like. Thanks once again for your time. All your talks were like really, really good. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, cheers, guys. For the next part, what we will do, a lot of folks have been asking how to get started and so on. I will hand over to my colleague Aneesh. Aneesh is a developer who works on one of our products called Kodu. Kodu is our machine learning product which actually gives you feedback on your code. So Aneesh will walk you through the rest of the session on how to get started. I do want to articulate one thing so that you also know what to expect from Geek Trust. Like Dibin said, he spent months learning how to write code, and then he solved the Geek Trust coding challenge, right? So Geek Trust is not a place for you to learn how to write code from the beginning. It's a place where you can showcase your skills. So while Aneesh will tell you how to go about solving the coding challenge, there is a baseline expectation that you can write like basic Java code, basic Python code, whatever the case may be. So I'm just setting that expectation before we get started. Aneesh, over to you.
Thank you, Krishnan. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Hey all, thank you for joining us. And let me just share my screen before we get started. So let me know if you guys can see my screen and hear me clearly.
Yes to both, Aneesh.
Great. So, before we get started, myself, Aneesh, like Krishnan mentioned, I work here at Geek Trust. I work on Kodu.ai, which is an AI-based code evaluation tool. And so I get to practice writing clean code every day. And it is a team sport, like Dibin mentioned. I get it requires practice. You practice every day. You improve every day with it. Just like any other thing you want to get improve on. Practice makes perfect. Like good practice makes perfect. Like the saying goes nowadays. So without further ado, let's start. So before we write clean code, before we discuss how to write clean code, I just want to let you guys know that do not think of Geek Trust coding challenges as competitive coding challenges, like you would find in other websites. Think about Geek Trust coding challenges in terms of how you would write quality production, quality software. And with that in mind, let's go about what is clean code. So clean code, I would say, is any code that could be understood and maintained by any developer. So by any developer, I mean other developers who have not wrote the code. So they come in, they want to make changes, and they are able to understand and maintain the code. Also, the person who developed. So if you had written the code and you come back, say after 2 months or 6 months, you come back and you see that, oh, this is what I have done, and it's very easy to convey what you have done. That is clean code. Because what happens is, whenever we are developing a new feature, whenever we are fixing a bug, things are very fresh in our mind. So we can write 10 or 20 or 100 line functions, and we say, like this is how it works. But you come back after 2 months or a year, because there is a changing requirement, there is a new bug fix has to be done, and then you are like, oh, what have I done here? I have to go through the code. So that is common. You might forget what you did, but if you just wrote the code in a way that was that made a lot of sense, it was concise, you used a lot of good named functions, good named variables, and you just read it and you understood it. You understood the flow and it all came back to you. That would be the perfect definition of clean code. So before we get into how, let's discuss why clean code matters. Like you might ask, what's wrong with the code that just works? Well, the problem is, software is never just written and forgotten. It's continually evolving. It's continuously changing. There are new requirements coming in. There are new feature requests coming in. There are new bugs that might be discovered. So you have to go back. You might have to read the code that some other developer might have written. You might have to read the code that you have written. Some other developer might have to come and read the code that you have written, and you have to make it easier for them and yourself to actually maintain the software and help evolve the software, because otherwise it's painfully slow to add new features. If you have to go through lots of code, you have to put things on debug, or have lots of print statements here and there to understand what is going on, so that you can find out which line of code you have to add or where the bug is. That's that hinders fastly developing software. That hinders bug fixes, and that's the real reason why clean code actually matters. Any developer should be able to make the change. Bug fixes should be easy. Maintenance should not be a nightmare. It should be easy. Oh, something has happened. Oh, I think I read this code and this says okay, here it might be the case. And that's why clean code matters. So the question is then, how do I write clean code? Well, to start with, use meaningful names for variables and classes and functions. Don't write variable names like X, Z, I. Have good names like names, or variable names of functions that actually convey the meaning of what they store or what they do. And that's really helpful, because when you read it, when you read the code, you understand, okay, you kind of get the context. Avoid magic numbers. Magic numbers are just a bunch of numbers sprinkled around the code. That actually tells you nothing about the code. Like you have 16 or 50 or 100. Why was that number chosen? What is that number? Is this number used somewhere else as well? So refactor them into constants that can be reused again and again. And if you have to change that number, you just go ahead and change that constant. Extract conditional variables into conditional statements into variables and functions. What does that mean? Well, variable, you might have if this and this or this, things like that. You write code, you might have written code like that. The problem is, when we are writing, we know like why we wrote this and this and this, but then we forget like why was it written like this, or what does it do? What does the underlying what does it mean fully, like this and this or that? What does that mean? So parse it into a variable or a function, and then give that a meaningful name, so that when you read, you understand, oh, okay, so this is what this condition is trying to tell. So let me give you some examples here. So if you look at this code, it tells you nothing about what is happening in the code. Just P. What is P? Why are we checking for 4 and 16? Handle click. What handle click? What does it mean? Nothing. There is no context here. You will have to put things in debug, or ask somebody who might have worked there, worked on it. Even they might have forgotten what is happening. So it's tricky to understand. You might be able to understand, but then you might have wasted half your day understanding what this is. Instead, if you wrote, if you refactored that code this way, like parse 4 and 16 into its own constants, those are magic numbers. Now 4 makes sense. Okay, it's the minimum password size. Okay, it's maximum password size. Okay, okay, that's great. so there is a if condition, is password valid, and we are passing the password. Oh, okay, so that's what we're doing here. We are checking if the password is valid or not. And that, how do we do that? That's where we check for the minimum password length and maximum password length. And instead of handle click, you say login. So that makes much more sense. Okay, if the password is valid, we are logging in. We actually, without knowing anything about the code, I just read the code and understood what is happening in the code, what is expected of the code. Similar example would be, naming variables that are, like list or email set, or, like name details, things like that. They don't really convey anything about the variable. Like a lot of modern IDEs actually provide you just hover over the variable and you'll get what is the type. So you don't need to append type to it. Instead, use meaningful names that convey why this variable is chosen. Like, oh, it's EMIs. Okay, so we get the loan EMI, and EMI is a array list. Okay, so we have a set of EMIs. Emails. Just the second guy had a good idea, but why name it email set? It's a set. So just drop that. It's too big and it's useless. So that's how you would name good expressive code. Keeping it simple. So always try and keep it simple. As developers, we tend to have the tendency to overcomplicate things. We are very particularly proud about, how look at my clever code. Like now it's very fresh in your mind when you wrote that clever code, but after a year you come back and you don't understand, you don't understand what you were doing, and now you have to have a feature written or have to fix a bug in that, and now you have to relearn everything what you were thinking, your thought process, everything had to be relearned, and that hinders maintainability. So there are many approaches to solving a problem. Try to choose the simplest one that everybody and yourself can understand. That it mitigates slowing down of development. It's easier to understand. Make it easy to understand for yourself and for others. Think about somebody who has not worked on it. If they come and look at your piece of code, will they be able to understand it? Will they be able to get the context, the business context, or not? So take for example this code. To understand this code, either we need a comment or we need to actually have some sort of dry run happening. What is index of push and doing? So clearly it means there is some algorithm at play here which needs an explanation on its own, and it seems like it's doing so many things, and just looking at it, I'm intimidated. So I need a little bit of time to actually understand what it is. If I were to refactor it here, now look at it. It looks okay. I'm filtering users. Okay, I'm filtering the name. Okay, or the email or the role. Oh, okay. So I am filtering users that match either name or email or role. That's it. So look at this code and look at this code. Both of them do the same thing. This code actually has, there could be bugs here as well, because it's not very clear what is happening here. Whereas here, it's apparent that what we are doing here, it's clear, and if you just read it and boom, you understood. Okay, what is happening here? It does not require much challenge to understand what is going on here compared to here. Modular code. So modularity is at the heart of maintainable software, and it's not just in software. Modularity helps. Any well designed product is modular in nature. Take a look at your phone. Like camera is built by some other company. The chips are designed by some other company, manufactured by some other company. Body is designed by some other company. The operating system is designed by some other company, and then they bring it all together to work as one unit. The advantage, look at metro construction. The bridge is not constructed at the same place as it's assembled. The bridge is actually constructed modular blocks is constructed somewhere else, tested for performance testing, tested for load testing. Things can be done, and then they are just assembled on the rail, and then the integrity is tested. Look at rockets. So when it comes to code, well-engineered code, a well-designed code, a well-maintainable code has to be modular, because modular code helps you to develop in isolation. That is, you don't have to worry about how other modules will interact with it. You just know what is the expected input to this module, and you can just simply give off what is the expected output. You can test it in isolation. You can write unit tests to test that module to make sure this module works fine. If the input is correct, the output will be correct. You can make sure the bugs, when they appear in your module, in specific modules, where to look for the bugs. Otherwise, what happens is, if it's not a modular code, what happens is you don't know where to start to look for the bug. The logic is all over the place, compared to a modular code where this where which modules to look for. And it's it makes life easier. It makes maintenance easier. So one of the best ways to do write modular code would be start off with separation of concerns. And the best way, the simplest, lowest hanging fruit of separation of concerns would be to divide them up into layers. View layer, a model layer, a service layer, a data layer. What do they mean? Layers will be responsible for their own work. Say, for example, view layer might only be responsible for presentation logic. Anything that happens in presentation, view layer is the layer to look at. Anything that has something to do with business logic, it's probably not view layer. It's definitely not view layer. Look at, for business layer, maybe it's the model layer. All the domain models are there. So that's where my business context lies. Something to do with database. I have a new database, or there is a new feature that I want to use from the database. I don't have to change business context or the view layer. Just look at the data layer, make changes there. And one of the best things is the changes are minimally affected. It's localized. You know that your changes are not going to break view layer or service layer or model layer. And that helps you a lot. That gives you peace of mind. Okay, I don't have to go test everything else just because I added this feature. I just have to make sure data layer works fine. Everything else will work fine. I know that. And I mean, we can run an integration test at the end to just see if it does work, but that would be the case. So how do you organize your code? There are, broadly speaking, couple of styles. One would be a stack style. Another would be entity style. So stack style is very popular, especially in web development, where you have code that is related to a particular layer together. So all the controllers reside in a controller package. All the your domain models reside in, say, an entity package. All the repositories reside in the repository package. This way, where to look for to make changes. I want to add a new behavior to my domain class. Okay, look at entity class and boom, add wherever you want to add. I want to add a new, awesome query that I found. I learned yesterday there is a faster way to write query. Look at repository layer, change the SQL, and nothing else needs to change. And this way, I can only test the repository that I made changes to, and I know and be peaceful at the fact that everything else will work just as well, because I didn't have to touch anything else. Another way would be entity style. Now, entity style is a little different, as in you could again use, say, guest or hotel or room. These are domain models. You could actually have all the layers related to a specific feature in a package, and you could again bifurcate them by layers, or you could have them similarly. So at the top guest, you would see there is again guest, all the things related to guest are within guest, but then again it's actually divided into its own layers, controller layer, entity layer, model layer, repository layer. Or you could actually have, if you look at rooms, everything is in, there is no need of package because everything related to room is there. Room controller is there, room DTO is there, room repository is there. I personally go with stack style, but choose both of them are equally helpful. Both of them, helps you separate out the concerns. Both of them, helps you determine where what goes. So choose the thing that is most natural to your solution, that you find most helpful, and stick with it. Coming to single responsibility principle. Now, this is a very important concept because because if you're writing a class, your class should have only one reason to change, and only one reason to change. Your class shouldn't be doing 5 different things. And by 5 different things, I don't mean your class should not have 5 methods. You could have as many methods as you want, but they should all be working towards a single responsibility. And the same applies for functions or methods as well. You should not be, your method should not be doing many things at once. It should be doing one thing, and it should be doing one thing very well. So let's take a look at an example. Say, for example, a book class. It has the title. It can get you the author. It can, turn the page on the book. So it might be a, this might be a model in one of those e-readers. Like you turn the page and it gives you the pointer to that page. And then it is also responsible to print the page. Which is not very, it seems like it does not reside here, because what happens if I want to add a new format for printing, say HTML? I want to print in HTML. Now I have to come and change in the book. What happens when there is a new edition of the book? I have to come and change the book as well. So there are 2-3 responsibilities. There are 2-3 reasons why you should change book class. That is very bad. So whenever you find that your class is handling more than one responsibility, change them out to different classes. Like, say, for example, in this case, the book class is only responsible to do everything related to book. And then the printing can be actually just given off to some other interface, which has which needs to have a behavior print page, and plain text printer, HTML printer, maybe there's some other format that comes in, iMobi or EPUB. You can have its own implementations. This way, it's powerful enough that whenever I need to make a change, I just need to extend the printer class and extend it. So there is extendability. I didn't touch any other old code, so I didn't inadvertently add new bugs there. And so this way, a single responsibility principle helps you in writing maintainable code that is extendable and readable, and basically just maintenance, happy maintenance. That's what it results in. Coming to do not repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself is a methodology where you don't write the same piece of code multiple times. You have say you might have some business rules, you might have some mathematical formulas or expressions that you have to check in 5 different places or 3 different places. If you duplicate the code again and again and again, what happens is whenever you need to make a change to one of those rules, you have to make sure that you change it everywhere, which is which can cause bugs. What happens when you forget to change in one place? It's really hard to then figure out why things are working in some place, things are not working in another place, and it just causes a lot of headache. So that is an example here. Like the user response. It's clearly the user response in get articles for user function and get comments for user function. Both are doing the same thing. They're first getting the user response, and then they are doing their own different responsibilities. So again, it's doing two things. This method is both these methods are doing two things. First, fetching the user, and then doing their thing, getting the articles or updating the comments or getting the comments. So how can we improve this? Refactor that get user into its own function. So now that function does only one thing. It just fetches the user. That's it. Anybody who wants wants to fetch the user, just call this method, call this function. And what happens is, whenever I have to update the API, I just need to update it in one place. Here I would have needed to update it in a couple of places. And this is just an example. What if user response is probably something that a lot of APIs might need, and I might have to change in 10, 15 or 50 places, and that is really hard, and it's just tedious work. Instead, pass it into a single function. You get it. You just change it once and everybody gets the benefit of it. So there are a couple of thought processes here. Do not repeat yourself and write everything twice. What it means is, do not repeat yourself actually restricts you to actually never repeat your code. Like you find some piece of code that is being used a couple of places, you take that piece of code, put it into a function, and then call that function everywhere. Write everything twice means you actually are allowed to copy it twice. That is, you paste it twice, but then the third time it appears, you take that and put it into a function and call it everywhere. I personally go with do not repeat yourself because because I might remember, oh, I had copied it a couple of places. My teammates might not, if they are working on the on a feature that I used, write everything twice, they might not actually know that I have written this code twice. So they just changed it here, and it works fine in one place and does not work fine in another place. So it's harder to debug, and it's insecure, and there are consistency problems there. So I personally go with dry, and I urge every one of you to actually follow dry principle. It just makes life easier. That's it. So to sum up, these are the properties of good code. You have reusable components. They are done in a modular way. And there are different modules that can be reused by other people. That can be reused in other a lot of places. These components can be easily tested. They can be easily debugged. They can be independently developed. Classes, having classes which have appropriate behaviors and attributes is an absolute necessity, but make sure that the classes have only one responsibility. Do not repeat yourself. Yeah, I mean, don't write same piece of code again and again. Have good meaningful method names and function names. Yeah, so coming to Geek Trust challenge, there are 5 badges that we look for: correctness, build, readability, object modeling, unit test. So correctness, we run your code against a set of test cases. You pass them all, you get the correctness badge. There is a build badge. If you use build tool and you provide build scripts, we will try to build your software, and if the build is good, then we give you the build badge. Readability and maintainability, like I said, you have to have good good variable names, good function names, small functions, small methods, and things like that have to be taken care of to earn readability and maintainability. Object modeling, well, object modeling is a badge where you get when your solution is well modeled, as in you have good domain classes. You have identified different domain classes. Your domain classes have good behaviors and good attributes that encapsulates what that domain does. Encapsulation breaks, or having static methods, or having improper behaviors or no behaviors at all in your classes. these will hinder you in getting object modeling back. So take care of those things, and you should be getting object modeling. Unit tests. Coming to unit tests, so unit tests are tests that actually test specific units. So units could be methods that are public methods, especially that does one thing well. And what happens is you could now actually write unit tests to check if the given some sort of input, is the condition being met, is the output correct. You could write a couple of tests that actually make sure your modules are working fine, and then you could combine and use them and have the peace of mind that everything will work fine. These are not to be confused with integration tests, where you actually test if your system is working fine together with all those modules. What we check for is unit tests, and you get the unit test if you have written unit test and you have a coverage of greater than 70%. So next steps, we have a couple of coding challenges, one for backend, one for frontend. These are already available in Geek Trust. Go ahead, go ahead and have a look and start solving. All the very best. All the very best. And before we move on, I want to show you how you could actually upload the code. Just go to geektrust.com, log in, sign in with your email or ID. If you don't have an account, sign up. I'm using my ID here. On the left-hand side, you should see a navigation bar with upload code. Just click on upload code, select the problem that you have solved. In your case, it will be expense management. Just to give you an example, let's say I choose Ledger. Select the language that you have solved in, let's say Java. If you have used any build tool, select the build tool. If you have not used any build tool, select none, but you won't be getting the build badge. So highly recommend that you use a build tool, because in the real world, building without a build tool is really cumbersome. So Maven or Gradle for Java. And then just choose the file that you have selected. So in my case, I'll just select a file. And now you could submit it, but before submitting, I recommend that you actually test your code to see if if your correctness is all fine, if you are getting readability or oops and build. So this thing takes 2 to 5 minutes. Yeah, so readability has come back. It says, okay, readability is good. Oops has come back. It says it cannot determine. So if you're if you are confident that your object modeling is good, go ahead and submit it. If not, check out our help docs or reach out to us. I would highly recommend checking out the help docs to see what can be improved. Similarly for other things as well, build. Okay, I have got the build is clear. I don't have unit tests, so I didn't get the unit test badge. Correctness is all good. So now you can actually submit your code, or if you want to improve, just improve your code and repeat this process again. Yeah, so we support zip, rar, gzip formats. So one thing to keep in mind is, you don't have to package when you compress. Delete node modules if you're using JavaScript npm. Delete node modules folder. Delete executables. For other languages, you don't need to submit your .jar file. We will build the .jar file. Make sure you only submit your source code and the associated configs if you have any. You don't need to submit your executables or libraries, things like that. Your pom.xml will be able to pull in everything, or your npm or your requirements.txt will have the libraries that is required. So just we will be pulling it manually anyways. So make sure you don't have to submit those things, and make sure you actually delete this, because some of these will cause your submission to be over greater 50 MB. We only support submissions below 50 MB. So these are the ways to keep it down. We only need your source code, buildable source code, to gauge your code. Yeah, test. Make sure everything's fine. Make sure you're happy with everything, and then submit. Do not submit somebody else's code. That is taken very seriously at Geek Trust. We will ban you for life, and you will stop receiving. You won't be able to get any job from Geek Trust from that point onwards. So it's okay to write. It's okay. Continually improve, but do not copy others' code. Do not go to GitHub. Pull in the first code that you got and submit it. Those things will be punished harshly. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Yes, so the submission deadline is tomorrow. You should be getting an email with the coding problems link as well. So I guess nothing but all the best, and hope you all have a great time in this session. And make sure you submit it by 10 p.m. tomorrow. And you can reach out for help via WhatsApp or email, or you could visit our help documentations at help@geektrust.com, help.geektrust.com. That's it, folks.
Hey, Aneesh, there are a couple of questions if you could take.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the first question is, how do we include unit tests?
So if you look at the unit test documentation, we support JUnit, we support, for Java, we support JUnit, for Python, we support PyTest or unit test. A lot of unit testing library for the language of your choice. So just go ahead and use one of those libraries, and make sure you follow the guidelines in the help docs, and you should be getting a unit test batch.
Great, thanks. And the other question was, I see that there are build options only for the backend challenge. How can we check it for the front-end code?
So front-end code, like if you're using React or Angular or Svelte, so they require a build tool anyways. So you can just go ahead and submit it. We will build it, and you should be getting the build badge. If things are working fine, you should be getting the build badge. Because front end, it's only JavaScript, and it requires a build badge. We have not provided the build badge, but if everything builds fine, you'll be getting the build badge.
All right, thanks, Aneesh. I think over to you, Purnima.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you, Aneesh. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on a Saturday morning. It was indeed a great session, and I hope we were all able to, have a proper understanding of what you're expecting in terms of the coding challenge. We have sent the coding challenge to you as an email. We had already shared it with you on, it was already published in the events page, and we had emailed it to you earlier as well. We have sent it to you once again in case you missed them. So take a look, read through, and go through the help docs we have in our website and get started with it. Our event support is on and until tomorrow. So you can WhatsApp us your questions, or you can email it to us. So yeah, and the deadline is till 10 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you all. Thanks for joining. Have a great weekend and all the best.